Hey, what's up everybody, Nexel here. Today we're playing Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and we're going to be talking about the new Supernova Plus Kingdom Hearts III Riku medal that just dropped yesterday in Global. Now, Riku's kind of a strange medal for what he was built for, just like how Sora and Kairi are kind of strange medals, but as always, we are going to do our banner analysis. We'll talk about the medal, the draw odds, and finally my thoughts and recommendations on whether or not I think you should be pulling for this medal. So first things first, with anything that requires you to spend jewels, you want to see how long you have to decide until that banner goes away. So in this case, we have until August 16th to decide if we want to pull for Riku, and that's kind of a funny date to note because if we look at the Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora deal, it also goes away on August 16th. So likely we're going to see the Kairi banner drop and it'll also go away August 16th, and it's kind of strange to get banners that were released on different days but all expire on the same day. It makes me think that there's going to be something coming out on August 17th. So this could be something like a new banner for JP's anniversary. So as always, I recommend waiting until the last day before deciding if you want to pull, because then you might see some of the new things that are coming out and then you might want to invest your jewels in those new things. But looking at the banner itself, it's a very standard banner where it costs you 3,000 jewels per pull. You get 3 Kingdom Hearts 3 medals with every single pull, which will generally be used for sub-slots, you sell them for draw points, or you keep them for some sort of unique special ability. For example, Kingdom Hearts 3 Anti-Aqua still has 100% magic reflection as part of her special attack, and that's still relevant for things like PvP and PvE Coliseum. You'll also be getting 1 trait medal for Riku with every single pull. You'll get 6 5-star or higher medals, which will generally be used for either sub-slots or you sell them for draw points. And then you'll also get 10 VIP coins that are good for the entirety of the month. Remember that VIP coins for Riku can be used for other banners that come out in the month of August. However, they do expire at the end, so just make sure you use all your VIP coins by August 31st. You'll also be getting 3 power gems with every single pull. Now remember, you don't pull because of the gems. The gems are just the icing on the cake. You pulled because of the medal. And you'll also be guaranteed a copy of Supernova Plus Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku within 5 draws. So we're looking about 15,000 jewels to guarantee the medal, plus an additional 2,000 to 3,000 jewels just to guarantee those perfect traits. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the medal itself. So this is Supernova Plus Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku. He has a base strength of 49,361, which is slightly higher than the previous set of medals. So just like Sora, Riku's about 300 points higher than those medals. He has a base defense of 21,608, which is nothing too special. He is a tier 10 and he is upright power. He has a multiplier of 19.72 going as high as 21.96. Now this is kind of a strange multiplier because on the high end it's 21.96, which is a really good multiplier. Remember the previous set of medals like Zemnis B or KR24 or San Francisco Sora had a multiplier that was roughly about 20.5 to 21. Now we have Riku, who on the high end is a full point higher than that, if not a little bit more. So it's really good that his multiplier is almost 22, but remember that Sora, Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, the most recent one we got, his multiplier is inherently, at minimum, 21.92. So Riku's multiplier on the high end is pretty much Sora's multiplier on the low end. Now Riku, on the other hand, on the low end of his multiplier, it's 19.72, which is not what we would be expecting from a new set of medal. That's literally less than the base multiplier of Final Fantasy VII Remake Sephiroth. So seeing a new medal come out that's slightly stronger but its multiplier is slightly weaker than a previous medal is not a good point for a medal. Looking at the gauge cost, it has a gauge cost of 6, which is really high. Now just like Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, you're likely going to need an attack boost max SP gauge reduction skill to get the most out of this medal. Remember, whenever you have that type of skill though, you have to have the initial cost of the medal before the skill will activate. The SP reduction from the skill kicks in after you've activated the medal. However, that means if you put SP gauge 0 on the medal and you do have enough gauges to activate it, you guarantee yourself a second activation. But just remember, it's something to keep in mind. You have to have that initial cost. Now, looking at the special attack for Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku, it is, just like Sora, a 2-turn buff. So remember that you get these buffs for 2 full turns unless you get nerfed or debuffed by the enemy. So for 2 turns, you are getting self-buffing for upright power. That means you get perfect buffs and debuffs for general upright and power. He gives all power metals plus 4,500 strength, which is just like Sora. And remember, just like with Sora, this can scale really quickly. So with extra attack, we're looking at plus 9,000 for the turn. And then with extra attack and on the second turn, because remember, it carries over from the previous turn, you're at plus 18,000, which is stronger than the metals like San Francisco Sora and Xemnas B, which gave you a maximum of 16,000 with its special attack. However, remember, this is a 2-turn buff. You don't reach the maximum amount of buffing until the second turn. He'll also give you special attack bonus plus 220% with the special attack, which is not very great because remember, we rely on supernova attacks to give us plus 300%, if not plus 320%. In terms of the effects of the metal, he has a damage plus condition of higher HP, which is generally an easy condition to meet because you usually start off all your Keyblade rotations with a heal buffer like Kingdom Hearts 3 Kyrie A or Kingdom Hearts 3 Nominee. So it's an easy condition to meet, but the multiplier associated with it is pretty bad. Remember that on the low end, so if you ever get hit with an interrupt attack, a counter attack, something like that, you have a 19.72 multiplier. So even though the condition is easy to meet, the fact that it's paired with a multiplier that has a bad end, especially for a new metal, is not very encouraging. And come on, it's Riku. They should have made him a stronger metal to begin with. In terms of effects, he does do count plus minus 0, which is still good because on average you want to keep the count up rather than bringing it down. Usually with the harder enemies, for example, enemies that show up in like critical modes or things like that, the count is more meant to disrupt you than it is to kill you. So for example, remember that the Nightmare Charithi event, when you bring its counter down, it will hit you with status ailments, which aren't necessarily meant to kill you, but it's meant to interrupt how you play your game. Sometimes with like the critical mode Sephiroth, the counterattack is meant to debuff you rather than completely destroy you. So remember, it's generally better to keep the count up unless it's a certain enemy that its counterattack is nothing to be worried about. In terms of effects, Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku also has defense boost piercing 30%, which is kind of bad actually. It's kind of backwards in design. So remember that we got a metal, Kingdom Hearts 3 Vanitas, that is defense boost piercing 50%. Now, for some reason, we went backwards with this new Riku metal, and now we're back to 30%. So I think that was actually just bad design, because if they wanted to make PvP a big thing for Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku, they would have made it a 50% defense boost break. Remember that the higher the defense boost break, more of those hits are going through. Now, I didn't talk about this earlier, but he does have 4 hits. So when we pair 4 hits with a 30% chance of defense boost breaking, that's actually pretty bad. Think about the metals like Dissidia Sephiroth. It only does 3 hits and it has a 30% chance of defense boost breaking. That means just like with Sephiroth, Riku, only one of those hits on average is going to be piercing defense, which is not a good thing. Looking at the Supernova Attack, it is a 1-turn buff, which is self-buffing for upright power. And remember, having self-buffing on a Supernova Attack is good because it's buffs on command. So for example, if you get debuffed in the middle of your turn by something like a Barrier Master, which is a very frequent enemy that we see, you can just use the Supernova Attack and boom, you are right back up, ready to hit them with full buffs for upright power. The Supernova Attack will also give all power metals plus 12,000 strength, which is about the new standard. We saw it with San Francisco Sora, KR24, the Sora that came before Riku. So we're looking for Supernova attacks that generally, at least for 1 turn, give you plus 12,000 strength. The Supernova Attack will also give special attack bonus plus 320%, which is good because, again, it's like the new standard. Now, in terms of the Supernova, it triggers before slot 1 when in PvP, which is pretty good because the metal will take care of itself. So unlike Kingdom Hearts 3 Nominee, where you need to pre-buff it with something like Kingdom Hearts 3 Kyrie A, if you activate the Supernova Attack for Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku in PvP when you're defending, it will buff itself, it takes care of itself, and you're able to hit with the highest amount of damage. However, when we look at the Supernova Attack, it really doesn't do anything else. Now, this is really strange, and this is one of the things that makes Riku kind of a weird metal, because they kind of released him as a PvP metal, but he doesn't have 100% defense boost piercing with his Supernova Attack, which is like our new standard for Supernova attacks that are good for PvP. So think about the best PvP metals. We're looking at Kingdom Hearts 3 Dark Riku, we are looking at Kingdom Hearts 3, we're just looking at regular Strike Form Sora. All those metals have defense boost piercing 100% with their Supernova Attack. And if we actually look at the game, so if we go to the game here, and we look at the top 10, let's look at what they're rocking out in terms of their PvP setups. Remember that Riku came out yesterday, PvP reset today. So if people thought Riku was good, they'd be pulling for him and then putting him on his setups. However, when we look at the top 1, this is number 1 in PvP. He has 4 copies of Strike Form Sora and then just Renovas. That's how strong 100% defense boost piercing is that you can just pretty much slam all of the medals as 100% defense boost piercing, and that's how you get number 1. So if we look at his counterpoint setup, so remember, counterpoint is an upright magic setup, but because of Dark Riku's 100% defense boost piercing, this is a valid setup. It means that this 6th Riku on the pet slot is doing crazy amounts of damage from all the buffing that came from the Lees and Axels. So remember that 100% defense boost piercing is the new standard for PvP. So the fact that when they created this Riku medal, it doesn't have 100% defense boost piercing with the Supernova Attack, that's pretty bad. So in terms of the draw odds for the medal, it's nothing special. If you can't Mercy the medal, don't pull for it. So what are my thoughts and recommendations on this medal? It's just really awkward, and not in a good way, actually in kind of a bad way. So it is a medal that can be used for PvP and PvE, but in terms of either aspect, it's not exactly great. So let's look at the PvE side. So in terms of PvE, the multiplier is great because it can hit almost 22, which is like our new-ish high standard for what we're looking for in terms of a multiplier. But it has a condition to it, which is kind of strange. And even though the condition is easy to meet, the fact that it even exists and that it could be as low as like 19.72, I believe. Yeah, the fact that it could be as low as 19.72 is not very encouraging. We don't want to be going backwards in terms of the multiplier. And remember that Final Fantasy VII Remake Sephiroth, at minimum, has a 20 multiplier. So this medal kind of feels like a step back when it comes to PvE in terms of the multiplier. Now, when we look at PvP, there's a lot of reasons that Riku is not a good PvP medal. So let's just go down the list. So number 1, he only has a 30% defense boost piercing on special attack, which is bad when we already have something that is a 50% defense boost piercing on special attack. He also only does 4 hits, so that's the second bad thing. So he only does 4 hits with a 30% chance, and that means only one of those hits is likely to go through. Remember, with PvP medals, you want a high number of hits because that means on average you know exactly how much damage is being calculated. In terms of PvP, the third thing that makes him bad is that he has no form of reflection whatsoever. Even though reflection doesn't really play a lot on the low tier ends of PvP, it can mean a lot in the high term ends of PvP, or the high ranking ends of PvP, because you could be reflecting like hundreds of thousands of points of damage with the higher ends, and that can be relevant. In terms of the fourth thing that makes him bad, Supernova Attack doesn't pierce defense. We talked about it quite a bit, but remember, the king of PvP is going to be able to do 100% defense boost piercing with the Supernova Attack. And then the fifth thing, and this is something I didn't mention earlier, is that the special attack buff is spread across 2 turns. Now this is bad because you won't be hitting Riku's maximum strength in the 1 turn that you'll have him for PvP. So even though he'll carry over to the next Keyblade, there's no guarantee that next Keyblade you use in PvP is gonna be a Power Blade. It might be a Magic Blade, and then it doesn't benefit from the 2-turn buffer that Riku gave it. So there's 5 good reasons why Riku is not a good PvP medal, but they kind of made it seem like he was going to be a PvP medal. So the medal is new, but what makes it kind of bad is that it doesn't strongly outclass the power medals that came before it. So for example, we saw it with the PvP setups. It doesn't really replace Strike Form Sora, mainly because Strike Form Sora is a great PvP medal that gives you 30% defense boost piercing. He also has next medal conversion, so whatever medal comes after him will receive the buffs from Strike Form Sora. Strike Form Sora also gives plus 6,000 strength to all power medals, plus 12,000 with extra attack, whereas Riku, for only 1 turn, because remember, it's relevant in PvP to give all your buffs in 1 turn, Riku will only give 9,000, which is actually 3,000 points less than what Strike Form Sora can do. And then Strike Form Sora, like we said earlier, has 100% defense boost piercing with the Supernova Attack, which is, again, the best types of PvP medals will have 100% defense boost piercing with the Supernova Attack. So the fact that he doesn't really replace something that's already out is kind of a bad point for the medal. So who should really be pulling for Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku? Let me go ahead and pull him back up. So who should really be pulling? The medal's still strong, And it does have PvE and PvP dual utility, so if you're like a huge Riku fan, or if you're in desperate need for a new upright power staple, this is actually a good medal. I'm not saying it's a bad medal, it just isn't strong enough to replace what's already out. So realistically, I don't think it's the greatest power staple either. So it is better than Cloud, Final Fantasy VII Remake Cloud, who is my current upright power staple, but not so much so that I would tell people to spend 17,000 jewels on it. So if we go ahead and take a look at our comparison, so on the left you can see Cloud's maximum amount of damage before, calculating for tiers, Keyblade multipliers, is 1,195,862, whereas Riku, on the high end of his multiplier, we took the high end of the multiplier for both of them, Riku will dish out 1,545,182 in terms of the special attack damage. Now, when you do the math, that's only about 30%. 30% can be relevant for some people, but if you're passing stuff just fine right now, really I don't see the need to pull for Riku. So if your best upright power medal is something like Alias, then you likely will get some benefit from having Riku be your next step up in terms of upright power. But when I think about this medal, when I think about the Sora and I think about the Kairi, something's kind of odd about them, because all three of them are like sort of good-ish medals, but they're sort of also not very good medals. So it makes me think they might be creating something like a new trio medal. So for example, a new Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora Riku Kairi combination medal, just like with the TVA medals, the Terra Ventus Aqua medals, like the Roxas Axel Xion. So they might be releasing some sort of super banner at the end, or some sort of campaign where you need to have all three to get some sort of trio medal. But honestly, all three of these medals are a little bit awkward, so I'm thinking that you should either be saving for something that's coming up, or if you need to replace them for your staples, then that's okay too. But with that being said, that's the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer when I have the time. If you'd like to join my Discord, get some off-hours help, the link is right below the screen. You just have to type it into your URL, and you are good to go. But that's all for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, until next time, take it easy.